Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
In 2016, Nicole and I penned an editorial in the Jewish Forward entitled, "A Letter to Our Children on Election Night." Deeply concerned about the rhetoric of the election cycle, we crafted a letter that was filled with hopes for our children, a message that spoke to and was subsequently shared by many. Toward the end of the article, we expressed the following. We said, "Raising both of you in this unprecedented world of technology and social media, the endless barrage of information and access, our parenting looks far different than your grandparents did to us. We have been learning alongside you how to navigate this world and weave our values through the thorny labyrinth. We have come to realize that our job is less to tell and show you how to be and more to help you develop the skills, to identify your own sense of justice, morals, and values, and to act accordingly, working on acceptance even when your sensibilities and choices differ. As we blessed you on those first Shabbat evenings of your lives, we bless you on this historic evening with presence so you may be present for others, with strength and pride in your convictions and identity, or respecting those who see the world differently than you. May you both be the fully expressed versions of your wonderful selves, unlimited by your ideals, and deeply empowered by your authenticity. We are already in awe of you." I returned to those words this week, reflecting on those lofty goals as Ethan, our oldest, prepares to leave the nest and begin this next chapter of life in college. What should be exciting years of inquiry and meaningful discovery in a person's life has been met with the sobering reality of what we are witnessing and what many of our college students are experiencing on their college campuses. While the reports and images from around the country have been exhilarating and inspiring for some, for others, and for many in our Jewish community, it has been incredibly disturbing. As a Jew, the anti-Semitic rhetoric and threats tied to calls for divestment from Israel, coupled with the explicit targeting of Jews, simply unimaginable. Classes and graduation ceremonies canceled, and scenes of police arresting political protesters, however necessary, reflect conditions counter to those required for institutions of higher education to actually thrive. So tonight, instead of reliving some of the happenings that many of us have already witnessed on the news and on our media feeds, I want to offer a deep understanding of how I believe we've arrived at the intersection of groupthink and intense anti-Israel Jew hatred, especially on our college campuses. The Boycott, Divestment, and Sanctions movement was officially launched in September of 2001 at the NGO forum of the infamous, and as some know it, anti-Semitic, UN World Conference on the Elimination of Racism held in Durban, South Africa. The initiators were a group of radically and politically powerful non-governmental organizations with visceral anti-Israel agendas. At Durban, officials from Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, and the Paris-based International Freedom of Human Rights allied with South African and Palestinian groups to demand, and I quote, "the complete international isolation of Israel as an apartheid state." The BDS movement onto campuses subsequently evolved significantly over the years. The movement takes much of its inspiration and rhetoric from the successful boycotts of the 80s and 90s that forced the South African government to abandon its system of racial apartheid. This is why the BDS movement tries, despite so many facts to the contrary, to draw a parallel between Israel and South Africa. Initially, BDS faced limited support and was often met with criticism and controversy. However, over time, it gained traction among student groups advocating for their interpretive understanding of human rights and social justice. For 2 decades, academics and activists have lent their voices to BDS, amplifying its message on human rights. Organizations such as the Student for Justice in Palestine, SJP, and Jewish Voice for Peace, JVP, have mobilized grassroots support on college campuses and beyond, which has increasingly fostered solidarity with the Palestinian cause. These figures and groups have played such pivotal roles in elevating BDS from a fringe movement to a global force for what they deem social change. The BDS campaign has long advocated a policy of anti-normalization by refusing to engage with Israelis, including those who verifiably have no official ties to the Israeli government, unless they have adopted positions akin to those of BDS. The group claims such connections would only serve to validate Israel. On a number of occasions, prominent pro-BDS groups in the U.S. have gone so far as to explicitly bar dialogue with pro-Israel groups, speakers, or even Zionists in general. The rise of the BDS movement serves as a foundational driving force and movement that we are now experiencing on college campuses. Eric Hoffer, an American moral and social philosopher, wrote and analyzed the phenomenon of mass movements. In his first book, True Believer, he noted the following. He said, mass movements can foster a unique form of lunacy, where the surrender to collective dogma replaces rational individual thought, leading participants to embrace extreme, often destructive actions in the name of their cause. Having just come from UCSD campus this afternoon, along with Heidi, in support of Hillel and Jewish students on campus, and witnessing firsthand the military-like encampments, it's clear that many students are joining the movement precisely because it is where they can feel a sense of belonging. They can feel a sense of purpose and validation in a world that measures self-worth at this moment by how viral your social media posts go. Even if it violates the core principles of DEI that many of them revere by demonizing one particular ethnic or religious group. The amalgamation of BDS and Hoffer's mass movements theory helps to offer a frame, albeit painful, in better understanding how one can appear blind to the suffering of so many others around the world, how one can profess to care about human rights, but have no concern for the Israeli hostages or those that were murdered, sexually abused, or wounded, or how so many protesters can openly express their support for Hamas, a sanctioned terrorist organization, and call for a third intifada, a violent uprising targeted Jews in Israel. And I can tell you, I lived through the second intifada, and it is violent. And it helps us to translate how one of the leaders of Columbia University protests can proudly record himself stating that Zionists deserve to die, that we should be grateful that he's not just going out and murdering Zionists. I honor, truly honor, the role and the positive power that free speech and peaceful protest can play in our society. I myself have stood for marches for causes that I believe in, and I have shared with you from this bima my support for the plight of the Palestinian people towards self-determination and the long-term hope of Palestinians living side by side one day with a safe and secure Israel in peace. Additionally, as recently as these high holy days, I invited you to wrestle with your personal and collective responsibility as guarantors for Israel, despite the pain we are seeing from its ultra-right-wing government. Last May, many from our community joined the protests in Israel to express our desire to retain its democratic ethos. Sadly, what we are witnessing on many American campuses today is not that free speech, and it is not peaceful. Rather, we observe and encounter utter disdain and hatred for those who are other, Jews who believe in the right to have a Jewish state, those who see themselves running counter to the collective dogma. As a Jew, we are mandated to see the pain of the other, to recognize that the scenes of devastation and loss in Gaza are heartbreaking, and they are tragic. Even for those who believe that Hamas is morally responsible for the devastation, as I do, we must still find a place for compassion and advocacy for all who are innocent. And I know that many of us here and throughout our Jewish community deeply resonate with these sentiments. Yet, the violence and the radicalization of a movement that could have had the potential to affect change is misguided at best. In a recent Newsweek article, Hamza Haoudi, a Palestinian peace activist from Gaza City, said the following about the protests on college campuses. He says, "It pains me to say this as a Palestinian from Gaza, as my home is destroyed and too many killed. I never thought I'd find myself criticizing those speaking up. And yet I cannot be silent about what I am seeing. The truth is that the manner in which many gather to voice their support for Hamas does more to hurt our cause than help it. You know what would help the Palestinians in Gaza? Condemning Hamas's atrocities. Instead, the protesters routinely chant their desire to globalize the Intifada. Apparently, they do not realize that the Intifadas are disastrous for both Palestinians and Israelis, just as October 7th has been devastating for the people of Gaza. They should be speaking up for the innocent victims of Hamas, both Palestinian and Israeli. Instead, they endorse Hamas's ideology with posters announcing resistance by any means necessary and chants of "From the river to the sea," effectively glorifying the Al-Qassam brigades, Hamas's military wing, whose ideology is entirely based on the elimination of more than 6 million Israelis from the land. It has deteriorated to the point that Jews are no longer attending university classes due to the current hostile environment, and that they are attending their classes online to avoid the demonstrators. The only conclusion, he says, that can be drawn from these demonstrators' silence concerning Hamas's atrocities and their anti-Semitic chanting is that they are not concerned with protecting Palestinians. They are out in their tents because of hatred for Jews and Israelis. As a Gazan and as a Palestinian, I want the protesters and the organizers of those protests to know that their hateful speech harms us. The Jewish person or Israeli you are intimidating during your rally may be the granddaughter of a Holocaust survivor or a family member of an Israeli slain or abducted by Hamas on October 7th. These folks would be your partners if the protests were about achieving lasting peace and justice for Palestinians and Israelis. I do not accept hateful speech or terrorist chants, and all these foolish dreams about eradicating Israel are disgusting and will never be achieved. Both of us, Palestinians and Israelis, are here to stay. Zionism was a dream for a people who had no place to go. For us to return to our homeland, for which Jews were exiled time and again. Zionism never sought the eradication of another people. Rather, it sought the return to a homeland for a people who were being annihilated, hated and oppressed. Just as importantly, there were another people on the land with their own story, that from Israelis acknowledging the pain of others led to the establishment of the Israeli peace movement. It led Yitzhak Rabin to shake hands with Yasser Arafat and led many Israelis to support the Oslo and Camp David Accords. Listening to the Palestinian story led Israeli historians Tom Segev and Benny Morris to help Israelis understand the pain of another people. It was listening to another person's story that allowed so many Israelis to work toward a day when two people could in fact live side by side. There is no pretty bow to wrap around the thoughts I share with you this evening. But I want to end with my hope, just like the ones Nicole and I had those many years back. And I want to add a few more thoughts now to that letter as Ethan and so many other Jewish students enter their college years and beyond. I say to them, have pride in who you are as a Jew, as you marvel at the most unimaginable determination to persevere against all odds, while remaining determined to manifest a brighter future. I want you to be open to the recognition that you are heir and custodian of a civilization that is thousands of years old, and that within it bountiful riches of theology and faith, ethics and philosophy, music and art, enough for a lifetime of endless exploration and enrichment are at your fingertips. I want you to know what it means to know that in fighting against anti-Semitism and for Israel's right to live in peace and security, you are striving for a better world that holds promise for all people who aspire to coexist in peace and in mutual respect. No matter how many others try to extinguish your light, Let their taunts be the springboard for which only serve you to amplify and share your powerful, beautiful, and expansive light with others. May that light always help strengthen the muscles which regulate your anger, your hurt, your disappointment, as we are taught that when anger grows within us, wisdom is lost. And may you always feel and ever discover the sense of joy, shared destiny, collective responsibility, and daily inspiration that your mom and I have had the privilege of experiencing throughout our lives. And yes, we are still in awe of you. The author Mark Twain, an admirer of the Jewish people, once noted in amazement, "All things are mortal, but the Jew, all other forces pass, but he remains." Ken Yehi Ratzon, may this be God's will, as we say, amen.